I've been blessed already. I don't know about you, but I've been really blessed. I was in a church recently, and he said, if you haven't been blessed already, there's a heart defibrillator out there. You can just use it. Turn your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 11, please. It's just sounding... it's just a text we're going to use. I'm not going to preach from Hebrews 11, but I'm going to preach from Genesis chapter 12 and 14 and 15. But if you can turn your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 11, that'll be our springboard verses, so to speak. This morning, the title of this morning's message is Abraham Pioneered a Life of Faith. Abraham pioneered a life of faith. When we think of Abraham, we think of many things. We think of Abraham, the semi-nomad. Traveled around different places, settled for a while, traveled around. We think of Abraham, the lover of Sarah. Abraham, the old aged father of Isaac. Abraham, the pioneer of the life of faith. He was also the friend of God and the father of many nations. But I wonder how many of us think of Abraham, the missionary. I said this to our host yesterday, and I got a puzzled look. I said it to my daughter. She was there at the table. She also had that puzzled look, and she started firing questions. Oh, I think I know what you're going. Nope, you're not allowed to say anything. I asked Brother Prophet if he'd preach out my message, because it's a fresh message. I don't want to preach the same 3 messages everywhere I travel. My wife needs something to feed on for the week, amen? I've done that before. But anyway, so I said, Brother Prophet, you're not allowed to check the notes. You got no cheating. You got to hear how Abraham pioneered the life of faith as a missionary. One scholar writes this: the Jews believed that there were prophets in the kingdom of Seba and Arabia, I'm probably killing those names, who were of the posterity of Abraham by Keturah. Remember when Sarah died, Abraham remarried Keturah? And they taught in the name of God, and they had received traditions from the mouth of Abraham. So we do have some historical evidence that whether or not it was planned, Abraham did missionary work on his travels. Whether or not that can be conclusively proved from Scripture, there is abundantly clear evidence that Abraham lived a life of faith just like a missionary is called to do. The title, again, of this morning's message is Abraham Pioneered a Life of Faith. We're going to read those verses, and then we're going to go to Genesis 12. Hebrews 11, verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father in heaven, as we look at your Scripture this morning, and I know we're not really looking at Hebrews 11, we're going to move now on to Genesis 12. I do pray you bless your word. And I pray you speak to us. Speak to hearts this morning. You know the needs. There are people in this room who need to begin a life of faith. There are people in this room who have already begun the life of faith, but they're not living by faith, and they need to step out by faith. There are people in this room who will step out by faith, but they need to listen to your voice because you've got more for them. They need to pioneer that life of faith. Lord, would you bless your word? Let it fall where it's supposed to fall. May those who are on Zoom be blessed and helped and encouraged. And I pray, Lord, you do something in our lives regarding faith this morning. In Jesus' precious name, amen. First thing I want to share with you is, like a missionary, Abraham had a call. Let's go back in our Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. We're finishing Hebrews, but Genesis chapter 12, we're going to take a look at the call of Abraham. Genesis chapter 12. Now the Lord had said unto Abraham, that's before his name was called Abraham, remember it was Abraham, get thee out of thy country, from thy kindred, from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. and I will make thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. But he basically said, get out. Get out from where you are. Abraham was called to leave his country. I've heard people label certain individuals as missionaries. I've heard some people call this lady who had a children's ministry, and she would teach children the Bible. Because she taught children the Bible in our backyard, she was called a missionary. I'm glad she was teaching children the Bible. That's how I got saved. Somebody taught me the Bible. I'm glad she was reaching out to children. I'm sure many of those children got saved. But that's not someone I might call a missionary. I've heard of people who have a printing ministry. They print Bibles, and those Bibles are sent throughout the world. They're called missionaries. I'm glad they're printing Bibles, because without the printing of Bibles, you wouldn't have the Word of God to spread and to preach. But just because they're printing Bibles, it doesn't mean that they're missionaries. Now, if they go with those Bibles and preach the gospel with those Bibles, it might be a different scenario. But that's not who I might call a missionary. By those broad definitions, every committed Christian is a missionary. And some people, I've seen some churches, they'll have the sign post as they leave their building, you are now entering the mission field. That is true. As you go out there, if you leave this building and maybe even leave the room, you're entering into the mission field. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're a missionary in the Bible sense of the word, because the word missionary comes from the Latin word mitto, meaning to send. Like apostle comes from the Greek word apostolos, one who is sent one, right? The point is, a missionary is someone who's sent. And Abraham was sent. He had a call. He was called to leave his country. And so that's the definition I want to use this morning as we talk about that. He was told to sell up and move out. Move home. Why? Because he had a definite call upon his life. I remember when Jenny and I began our missionary lives, we were back in Ireland. I was working in IT in a company, and I was enjoying my job. Half the company, I was getting paid to preach the gospel. And half the company heard the gospel. There was like 80-something employees, and their computers would need a software update or whatever, or there was a virus that went through and they had to be completely reformatted and started again. And I had our assistant talk with them as I'm waiting for Windows to install in their computer and install the software, Microsoft Office and all that type of stuff. And they were fishing targets. What a blessing. I got paid to preach the gospel. I loved that job. The owner of the business would come to me and ask me questions. On my last few days, my job, the CEO would ask me, so where are you going? Why are you going to America? And I give my testimony. We shared the gospel. It was a wonderful environment. Did anybody get saved? I don't know. But I had a wonderful opportunity. But that's not being a missionary. That's just being a Christian, right? But there was a time in our lives where we received a definite call where the Lord says, okay, leave Ireland. Leave Ireland and go to America and work with your father-in-law. My father-in-law, Jen's dad, was a pastor. He said, I want you to work with me for 1 year. And I said, 2 years, he said. I said, no, I can't leave Ireland for 2 years. I'll give you 1 year. And he said, 2 years. I said, no deal. But God had other plans. Because when God calls someone, you don't bargain with God. You don't say, well, Lord, I'll serve you so many years here and so many days here. No, you do whatever you're told to do. Because he's the commander-in-chief. He's the Lord of hosts. He's the captain of the army. And he knows what he's doing, but we don't. You ever feel like that, preacher? You don't know what you're doing? I feel that way a lot. Lord, I don't know how to do this. But God just steps in, shows you what to do. He always gives you the wisdom to do what the things he's called you to do. But Abraham was called to leave his country. Abraham was called to go to a new land. The Lord said unto him, Abraham, get out of thy country and from thy kindred, from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. Now, not all missionaries, I understand, are called to move country. So we have what's called home missions, and you have foreign missions. Your pastor is or was or something in there, a home missionary. Okay? He left where he was and he started missions. And we have nationals born on the mission field who are called to preach there and start churches there, and they might be called missionaries. It's the same in USA. Not all missionaries move country, but here's the thing. All missionaries get involved in pioneering something new. Pioneering something new. New territory. For Abraham, it meant leaving his country and leaving his family and leaving his support structure and leaving his creature comforts. We all like our creature comforts. We like our iPhones, right? Amen? I was told once I used an iPhone, I wouldn't go back. It's true. Takes much better pictures. I'm brutal at taking pictures. I can take the best camera you have and take terrible pictures. I remember getting a camera, and it was this 200 euro Fuji camera, and I just said, I'm going to throw it out. It's just absolute rubbish. My wife and I hated it, and my son, who's now an ambassador, said, "Dad, can I have the camera?" "Sure, you can have it." He started taking these amazing pictures. "How did you do that?" Because he wasn't me. That's how he did it. But I like my iPhone because it takes even bad pictures, or good pictures from bad photographers. Do you understand? But we have to give up. Sometimes God will call us to leave it all behind. Jenny said she didn't want to go to Africa. Not that she doesn't like Africans. She doesn't like snakes. She doesn't like spiders. Praise God, I don't like snakes or spiders either. So we have something in common here. So I'm not looking to go anywhere where there's snakes and spiders. Do you understand what I'm saying? But you do whatever God tells you to do. Go wherever God wants you to go. I think we all understand that. But here's Abraham, and he left his country, he left his family, he left his support structure, he left his creature comforts, and he was 75 years of age. When you're young and you leave, and I remember when we were in our early 20s, we left it all behind. It was exciting. I had this big tax bill, and you know what? The government didn't know I owed it. I could have walked away and no one would ever know. But God knew. And I had this tax bill. I said, "Lord, if you want me to go to America and train for the ministry, you're going to have to pay my tax bill." And God did. There's a story behind it. And we paid our tax bill off. I had $1,500 in my pocket. I had no job. I had no home. I had no car. I was going to a country, and all I had was $1,500. How long would $1,500 last in New York City? There's a lot of laughing going on there. 2 days, maybe? Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point. But God took care of us. And we didn't care. We just go one-way flight on a Boeing 777 British Airways. It's the last time I'll ever do, on purpose, go through London to get to America. It is brutal going through London. But anyway, that day was good. And we went to Heathrow, we got on Boeing 777, and all we had $1,500 in our pocket. But you know, my God should supply us all your, according to riches in glory by Christ Jesus. You know what the Bible says? He did. We didn't starve. Maybe we should have a little bit. Maybe I should have a little bit. But God took care of us. Because he does. We had youth on our side, but Abraham was 75 years of age. But he had that pioneering spirit. You with me here this morning? He had that pioneering spirit. Abraham was called to leave his country. He was called to go to a new land. And he was promised great blessing. Look at verse 2 and verse 3. It says, "I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great. Thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed." Rarely, if ever, does God promise us blessing. When I say blessing, I mean numbers. Adoniram Judson labored. He went to India as a missionary, and whatever happened, I remember the story. He ended up in Burma, right? He labored for 6 years without a single conversion. And then praise God, he got a convert or two or whatever it was. Then he had to move again. But he labored and labored. God has never made promises. But we see Abraham here, and God says, "I'm going to bless you. Wherever you go, wherever your sole of your foot touches, that's going to be yours. I'm going to take care of all your needs. I'm going to give this blessing over here, this blessing over there, and kings and nations are going to come from you. Those promises are not made to missionaries. And that can be disconcerting. And that can even be discouraging when you're there on the field for a long time and you're not seeing the fruit you want to see. I remember standing on this building, it was a previous building, or 2 or 3 previous buildings ago. If that's good English, it'll work. But I remember being here and telling you, I want to see a church of 200 in 5 years' time. I think in the first 5 years, we might have 200 people, but they never came all at the same time. And there might have been one-time visits, never came again. You know how that goes. But God didn't bless what I wanted him to bless. And he didn't give me the fruit I wanted to see. But the thing is, brethren, God never promised that to me. But you know what he promised? Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. And God promised that he'd bring us through things. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them. You're going to teach people, and God says you're to baptize them. It supposes that they're going to get saved. We have a book of promises here. It's called the Bible, isn't that right? Brethren, that is what helps us. That's what strengthens us. But Abraham was promised blessing. And I want to tell you something. Everyone who follows the Lord and follows his call is promised blessing. It's called the Great Commission. We call it the Great Commission. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. That's the Great Command, the Commission. The Great Commandment as well, right? But it's the Great Commission. When? Where? How? God never promises to answer those questions. But he does promise us blessing. God is calling. God is calling people. I think there was a song sung about that just before I said it. Am I right about that? Yeah. God is calling. But I wonder who is listening. Who's listening? I was, Jenny and I were at an elderly couple's home in Michigan a few days ago. This lady would write to our children. I don't know if we ever met her. Maybe we had. We didn't remember her. But she had started writing to our children, sending them Sunday school material and just writing notes, personal notes. And Hannah became enthralled with this dear elderly lady. In her late 80s, writing to Hannah. She's now in her early 90s. She's too elderly now, too frail to write those same letters. But we went to visit her and her husband. We met them. It was like meeting them for the first time. We had a wonderful visit with them. And they made the statement, the husband made the statement. He said, I've been praying for my family members as God would call them into ministry. He said, I had a grandson, and he was working on the border. These are the but anyway, I was working on the border, and the grandson was working on the border, making all sorts of money. And God called him into the ministry. He dropped everything at once. Then he had a son-in-law, if I have the story right. And God was calling him. And he had a really good job. He said, making all sorts of money. He just quit his job and went and started pursuing the ministry. Bible school again, it's called the story. But you know what makes me think? God is calling. You think, I can't go. I got this going on. I got that going on. I'm too old. You say that to Abraham. You say, but I've got my career established. You say that to Abraham. You know they did archaeological digs. And there's evidence that a man called Abraham was up in a place called Haran. And there was names of family members found on coins that seemed to resemble Abraham and his family members. Terah. It seems like Abraham was making all sorts of money. You don't get the idea he was poor, do you? He left everything behind. Now, okay, he brought his camels and all that. You get that. But the point is, It didn't stop them serving Christ. Everything we have on this earth is on borrowed. It's borrowed. I love the way the Bible records. I was just thinking about the Exodus. When the children of Israel left Egypt, the Bible says they borrowed from the Egyptians. They weren't going to pay it back, just that you know. But God has lent us everything on this earth, and sometimes we get to keep those things for the rest of our lives. But brethren, they're only borrowed. They all belong to the Lord, isn't that right? So let nothing stop you following his call. If God is calling you, you have your ears open. You say, yes, Lord. Yes, Commander-in-Chief. Yes, King of Kings, Lord of Hosts, and Captain of the armies. I'll do whatever you say, Lord. You'll never regret following the Lord. Never. Never. Like a missionary, Abraham had a call. Number 2. Like a missionary, Abraham lived by faith and obedience. Look at verse 4. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. I'm not going to get into the details of Lot going with him. That's another story. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. When God called Abraham to leave, he left in obedience. I was reading recently about Moses, when God called Moses. I could definitely, the more I read about Moses, the more I can relate to Moses. But Moses had 5 objections. And his final one was, Lord, send somebody else. Send by the hand of whom thou wast sent. Send somebody else, Lord. God says, go. You know? But Moses formed objections when God called him, and humanly speaking, we get it. But as long as we object, brethren, as we sung in the songs this morning, souls hang in the balance. You know, is it 3 people die every second? How many of those people are on the way? By the end of this message, probably thousands of people will have died. Where are they going? You can't save anyone. God is the only one that can save. But you can make a difference in somebody else's life. And who knows, 70 people in heaven right now, and you have no idea. You had a hand in them getting to heaven. Maybe you took a gospel leaflet out, you gave them a gospel leaflet, and they read it. And I was talking to somebody recently. I think it was the same couple again. And they were saying, somebody gave me a leaflet, and I held on to it for 3 years. 3 years. I was talking to a lady just before we came over here, and she was drunk. She called me up. I don't think she even remembered calling me. But I followed up with her, and she had one of our gospel leaflets on her mantelpiece. She said, "What the ladies from the church?" She was quite set because nobody else would have done this in the village. Pastor a leaflet. She said, "I have it on my mantelpiece." Spirit of God doesn't just call people to missions, he calls people to salvation. God is calling sinners all the time to salvation, isn't he? As he said to his brothers, his earthly brothers, his earthly half-brothers, he said, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. God is always calling sinners to repent. And so he's calling people, but he needs people, human beings, to be his conduits. He needs us to be part of the process. He could write the gospel in the skies, but he wants to use object lessons. Sinners like you and me who can convert and change and say, look what God has done in my life, unworthy as I am, the sinner that I am. You've got this joy. I can't get over how joyful you are. Where'd you get that joy from? Walk down the street and see if people are smiling. I was talking to a man this morning and he's saying the misery that's written in your newspapers sounds like the reporters in New York are similar to the reporters in Ireland. They don't look for the good news, they look for the bad news. So you've got information junkies filling up their mind with all sorts of bad news, and they're miserable. They haven't heard the good news that Jesus Christ died on the cross for sinners. Amen. You got the good news. And you can take that good news with you everywhere you go, and you've got the joy of the Lord as your strength. Isn't that right? You can bring that everywhere you go. And with that gospel message, with that good news, you can make a difference. Abraham was called by God. He made no objection. He didn't ask for signs like Gideon did. He didn't ignore the Lord as if he'd never spoken. You ever call your children? You ever have any of these kids, you call them and they pretend like they haven't heard you? Little rascals. They didn't hear you. If you said, I want to take you to McDonald's, you could whisper, and they'd be in the furthest place in the house, and they'd sit and run down. Did you say McDonald's? Oh, I meant, yeah, whatever, joke about it. They hear you when they want to hear you. And brethren, we can be the same. God is calling. We hear him when we want to hear him. Do you understand what I'm saying this morning? But Abraham didn't ignore the Lord, and he didn't run the other way like Jonah. He was obedient. When God called Abraham to leave, he left in obedience. Also, when God promised him an heir, he believed by faith. Look at Genesis 15. Genesis 15, look at verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abraham in the vision, saying, Fear not, Abraham. I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. I love those verses. And Abraham said, Lord, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? Abraham said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, although one born in my house is mine heir, and culturally that's what would have happened. His servant would have become his heir. Behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth and said, Look now toward this heaven, and tell the stars if they be able to number them. He said unto him, So shall I see thee. So shall I see thee. And Abraham believed. I wonder how many people are not prepared to follow the calling of God because they don't believe God can take care of them. You say, I worked so hard to get my education. I worked so hard to get this job. I've worked my way up the ladder. And if God calls me, I'm not sure if he can take care of me. You never say that. But you do. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because God is trying to pry your fingers off your life and your struggles. Your struggles. It's a lot of faith. God can be trusted. Did you trust the Lord Jesus Christ with your soul? There are people who will say, I'll trust him to get me to heaven, but I won't trust him with my life. You never say that, but that's what the next do. Let me say this, dear brethren. If you can trust Jesus Christ with your soul, you can trust him with your body. You can trust him with your spirit. You can trust him with your life. Would you agree with that? It's true. Our God can do anything. And if you don't know that for sure, you better ask people who've trusted him to hear their stories. I don't have the time to read my stories. Your pastor has lots of stories. And any missionary you come across has stories. Lots of stories. God is so good. I'll tell you one story. One of hundreds of stories I could tell you. I remember being in California. I was on deputation, and we bought a car for cash, a van. And the guy called me and said, Listen, I need another $1,000 to pay for my van. And I looked at my checkbook and said, No problem. I wrote the check for $1,000, gave him the check, and actually this was in Wisconsin. Then we found ourselves back in California. He called me up. No, the bank called me up. Said, Your account is on $500 in the watch. Now, I'm not used to being like that. And I can't. Like every good missionary does, I can't. And I cried out to God, God, you promised you take care of me. And I breathed like Moses did at the Red Sea. You understand that? Just read it if you don't understand. He did. The Lord said, Stop crying. Just get across. Put it to rod. Okay. That was me. And we visited a church. And at that church, we gave our presentation, and one of the men of the church came up and he said, Here's your first support check. I said, thank you so much, praise the Lord. We're $500 in red. He said, do you want to check? Now, I don't read checks in front of people. I don't know. I think it's rude. Some people do. Okay, you know, I just don't do that. He said, do you want to look at your check? I said, sure. $1,000. You knew what I meant. My God shall supply all your, according to the Christian word of Jesus. That's one of many stories where God is taking care of things. He takes us right to the edge. We're hemmed in by mountains on one side. We're hemmed in by mountains on the other side. The Egyptians are furious on our tails. There's a sea in front of us. We know where we're going to go. And God says, protect your rock and stress. That's not good. Can God be trusted? You'll never obey the call of God to be a missionary if you don't trust God. If you want God to use you, you've got to learn to trust Him. You've got to learn to obey Him. Do the things that He's told you to do. What does God want us to do? Be in our Bibles every day. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Be in the Bible every day. Be in prayer. Not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together. Be in the house of God. Do the things you know you're supposed to be doing. Walk in obedience. When the Spirit of God puts it on your heart to reach out to somebody who needs Christ. Trust Him. Obey Him. Make yourself available to Him. God promised Abraham an heir by faith. But when God made this promise to Abraham, there was one problem. It was a serious problem as well. Abraham had no sons. God has called us to faithfulness, but He has also called us to fruitfulness. I hope I'm not stepping out on a limb by saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I tend to do those things. One of my least favorite songs is So Stand By You. It's like a funeral dirge. It goes like this. So stand by you to labor. But then unrewarded. How unscriptural can you get? God has promised us fruitfulness. God has not promised us to go out there and serve Him with no fruit. Unrewarded. That is not true. I read the history, but the guy was in depression when he wrote the song. Maybe they should have prayed instead of writing the song. Maybe people should have. Why did that become the most popular song of the 19th century? What was wrong with those dear people? Because it's not true. But God has not promised us how much fruit, when, where, how. God has not made those promises. He just promised us fruit. What did Abraham get? He got one son, Isaac. What did Isaac have? Yes, one son, Jacob. Now, when I say one son, this is sort of promise. Do you understand what I'm saying? Isaac, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. In Hebrews, right? So Isaac was a son of promise. Jacob was a son of promise. Jacob had 12 sons. We're getting more fruitful here. And those sons, I mean, it's so vast, okay? And Israel grew to something like 2 million before they crossed the Red Sea. Millions, anyway. Brethren, there are millions of sons. There are millions of Jews around the world today. You've got Jews here in New York. There's Jews in Ireland. They're all throughout the world. You've got millions of Jews throughout the world today because of one man, Abraham. Faithfulness leads to fruitfulness. You've got to believe that. No one is going to go out and serve if they think they're going to get nothing out of it, right? What do you want to do for the rest of your life? I want the lowest paying job I can find. I want to live in the most degrading circumstances because I'm a seed and I want to shave my head. My head doesn't look like this because I want it to look like this. I don't want to look like a monk. It's just natural. I need to get a natural shine out of this. But I'm not looking to be a seed. I don't want to sign up to have no blessing in my life. I actually want blessing in my life. God wants to bless us, brethren. God's work done God's way will always yield fruit in God's time. You've got to believe that. God's work done God's way will always yield fruit in God's time. But God cannot bless those who do not live by faith and obedience. Like a missionary, Abraham had a call number 2. Like a missionary, Abraham lived by faith in obedience. Finally, like a missionary, I love this one. Abraham lived to worship. I enjoyed the worship this morning. You worshipped when you sang. We worshipped when the dear family played that special, which was a wonderful blessing. We worshipped when the salty was sung. I'm killing their names, but when that song, that special song, we worship when we did it, right? It's called worship. And we're involved in worship. When God met with Abraham, he worshipped. Look at verse 7. We're back in chapter 12. We're looking at verse 7. It says here in verse 7, and the Lord appeared unto Abraham and said, unto thy seed will I give this land, and there he builded an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. When God met with Abraham, he worshipped. What did he do? He built an altar. An altar is a place where spiritual decisions are made. I don't know what you do in the Heritage Baptist Church. In the Gospel Baptist Church, we have an altar at the front where people come forward. Not always, not every week. There are times when people come forward, they'll kneel at the altar and then make spiritual decisions. You might have an altar where you won't walk. I have a forest. We live in the country. I'm a redneck. Proud of it. Okay? And one of my sons is a brown neck. He didn't inherit my redder skin, my ruddier skin. But anyway, across the valley, we have a forest. And I have, that's my altar. Place where spiritual decisions are made. I remember exactly where I was in another forest when I prayed and God spoke to my heart about getting a lawyer involved so I could get a visa to get over here because I was shut out. You may remember that. An altar. I remember exactly where I was. I could take you to the spot today, exactly where I was walking. God spoke to my heart at the altar. Everyone needs an altar. Abraham's altar was Bethel. Whenever he came to Bethel, he saw that altar and he remembered his decisions. He remembered his time of dedication. He remembered the time when he fell on his face in humility before the Lord. It was that place where Abraham worshipped the Lord intimately. Every missionary, every serious Christian needs a Bethel for worship. I have heard, and I don't know where George Gallup got these stats from, but I've heard that the average pastor spends 7 minutes a day. I've got to believe that is across every single denomination. I couldn't imagine trying to do ministry without spending time. I couldn't imagine it. But if that's where the pastors are at, whatever denomination of our Lord, where are those who profess Christ? Oh, brethren, we've got to spend time in prayer. I think you're having a prayer meeting on Wednesday. Is that what it is? If you're a serious Christian, you're going to be here. Now, if you have to work, we all get that, right? We all understand. But you ought not be sitting at home when there's a prayer meeting going. Like, you need to stoke the fire. If you're going to have a cold winter, you need to stoke the fire to get the place burning. You need to hear. Not the building burning, just the place burning. You understand what I'm saying? You want some sweat moving down your face. You're saying, we're meeting with God. And the tears should be rolling as you seek the face of God. Because, brethren, God answers prayer. Do you believe that? Gospel Baptist Church got a reset this summer because of prayer. I really believe that. We had a prayer meeting at 7 a.m. in the morning. You say, why get up at 5:30? We don't, we're Irish. A 7 a.m. prayer meeting is like fasting for 40 days and 49 hours, okay? This is like being a monk, being Swedish, okay, for us. I'm going to use that way. But we got up for that prayer meeting, and we would be down in Lucan Village in our church building at 7 a.m. every day, right till the time we left for come back to the States to take care of Jen's dad's parents while we're here. Listening churches and closing jobs, Jen's dad's, and the state. God. Our Wednesday night attendance up to that point was really low. People start coming out of the woodwork. Where did they all come from? We look around and was like, people know it's Sunday morning. Woo! Does God answer prayer? We saw people get saved. We saw lives changed. We saw decisions made, baptism. People join the church. This is prayer. We can't do this in the army of flesh. I can tell you one thing. If you read through the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, from Exodus to the Deuteronomy, you'll learn that Moses prayed, right? Nothing of eternal value is accomplished in that. You need your water. You need your place to pray. You need your place to worship. You need your place to worship. When Abraham erred and made mistakes, he reestablished his place of worship. Let's go to Genesis chapter 13, excuse me, verse 3. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, onto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, onto the place of the altar, which he'd made there at the first. And there Abraham called on the name of the Lord. What had happened? Let me just say, even though you may have an intimate relationship with the Lord, it doesn't mean you won't mess up. We're sinners, right? For all that sin comes from short, glory of God. We all fall short. We all mess up. And Abraham did it. He lied about his wife in Egypt. He said she was his sister. He justified saying, oh, she's my half-sister. It's not the point. He was dishonorable. He was lying. He was deceitful. And he messed up. Everybody messes up at times. But the question is, what do you do after you mess up? David was a man after God's own heart. Abraham was a friend of God. Why? It's not because they didn't mess up. It's because what they did after they messed up. Abraham went back to Bethel. And he reestablished that relationship with God. I'm so sorry. I just want to pour in my heart and tell you everything I'm wrong. I want to go to good cleaning, good cleansing, a good washing. If we confess our sin, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and cleanse us from all unrighteousness, right? I just want to go to God. I just say to you, I'm so sorry. I misrepresented you. I know better than this, Lord. I shouldn't have done that to you. God forgive me. God is so gracious. He put that holy arm around Abraham so to speak spiritually. My son, I forgive you. I love you. And there was a perfect reconciliation, beautiful reconciliation. Come, let us reason together. Though your sins may be as scarlet, they should be white as snow, white as wool, but the way to Isaiah. The point is, God cleansed him. God cleansed him and washed him. Bethel. It breaks my heart. I see names of people in your church, and we people by those same names in our church who are not there anymore because they wouldn't go back to Bethel. They messed up, but they wouldn't come clean. They hardened themselves. And there's people who were on your mission trip in 2009, sweet members of this church. People maybe some of you still love and know, who are not walking with God today because they wouldn't go back to Bethel and get that cleansing. Everyone messes up. Everybody does stupid stuff because we're failures. We're failures before a holy God. He's the one that doesn't mess up. Missionaries are far from perfect. People have this naive view of missionaries at times until they maybe spend more time with us. Do you ever notice that the Hills only go to your church for one service? We don't want you to get to know us. We want you to be naive. We want you to think we're wonderful. If you think my wife is wonderful, you're right. If you think I'm wonderful, I fooled you. And my kids will fool you too. You won't have enough time to interrogate them. We just see God moving. But the point is this. We all messed up. But we need Bethel to get the cleansing. There are missionaries today who are no longer missionaries because they wouldn't go to Bethel and get the cleansing. Now, if they go back to the States and take a pastor just on the ministry, praise the Lord. Finally, there's people I know who are no longer in the ministry, and they're serving themselves. And you can tell by their Facebook posts. There's something made by Facebook. It's a tell-all. And I love one of my favorite Facebook posts is, "Don't judge me." I just write back, "I don't have to judge you. You're already telling me who you are." Careful what you post. Careful what you say about yourself, because people may not need to see that. Do you understand what I'm saying? But you tell a lot about where people are at through what they post and what they say. And I just say to those people who make their complaints, who are not at the place where they should be, get back to Bethel. Get back to Bethel and get that cleansing. When Abraham erred and made mistakes, he went back to Bethel. But finally, and I love this, when he won serious battles, he worshipped. Look at Genesis chapter 14. So back to Bethel again, a place of worship. In Genesis 14, we'll look at verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return. This is Abraham, after his return from the slaughter of Kedor Laomer, of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale, and Melchizedek, king of Salem. King of Salem, Salem means city of peace. And the king of right, Melchizedek means king of righteousness, from the city of peace. This is pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. He brought forth bread and wine, unleavened bread, no doubt. The wine would have been fruit juice, because wine in the Bible is used as a general term. And he was the priest of the Most High God, pre-incarnate Christ. Verse 19, he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hands." And when the Melchizedek's word were ended, he, Abraham, gave him, Melchizedek, tithes of all. Abraham worshipped. What had happened? 4 kings went into Sodom and these different areas, won the battle against all those kings, and brought all the people captive. Lot, Abraham's nephews among them. Abraham says, "I'm not taking that. I will protect my nephew." He went back with 318 men. He took down 4 kings. Wow. If God be for us, we could be again. This is a David and Goliath situation. And David won again. And God brought a mighty victory. And brethren, there's times in our lives when we as missionaries see great victories. We see God do wonderful things. We see victory after victory after victory, and you're tired. And one of the most dangerous places to be at in your Christian life is when you've just seen a great victory. I see people make wonderful spiritual decisions and walk away from church. It's heartbreaking. Therefore, I cannot particularly stand to take heed. Just keep going. What did Abraham do after he'd won a wonderful victory? He worshipped. After winning a great victory, he said, "Lord, I know it wasn't me. I know it was you." And I could spend the time just unwinding and going on a family holiday and going on my Facebook page. I'm not against Facebook. I don't misunderstand me. Just be careful with it. I can go online. I can do this, that, and the other. But I'm not going to do that right now. Abraham said, "I'm going to worship." He said, "Lord, all you give me, I want to give you a tithe back again." Abraham tithed, amen. If Abraham can tithe, we can tithe, right? He gave his tithe to the Lord. He worshipped. And he gave honor to the one in recognition. People who don't tithe think they make their own money. People who tithe recognize where it comes from. Because that's what it's about. It's a recognition of who gives you the wealth. Deuteronomy 8:18. It's he that gives us wealth, right? That's what tithing is. It's recognizing. It's worship, brethren. It's really important worship. And Abraham fell on his face before Jesus Christ, the pre-incarnate Christ in the form of Melchizedek. He said, "Thank you, Lord, for the victory you give me." And he gave tithes of all, the Bible tells us. And he worshipped. When he won serious battles, he worshipped. That was the life of Abraham. the man who pioneered the life of faith. Brethren, this morning we've seen, like a missionary, Abraham had a call. I want to ask you the question, do you feel the call of God upon your life? Are you open to God calling you? Are you willing for God to call you to the mission field? Number two, like a missionary, Abraham lived by faith and obedience. Now, that's for just any Christian who's serious, live by faith and obedience. But God will not call a man or a woman who he cannot command. If you're not willing to live by obedience, you cannot be called. He won't call you because he can't command you. But if you're willing to live by faith and obedience, he can call you. And he wants to. Are you someone God can use in his service? And thirdly, like a missionary, Abraham lived to worship. Do you live to worship? Do you have a place that you can call Bethel? It's my spot. That's where I go. No one else is allowed to come. It's my time with God. I'm now preaching at myself. My phone doesn't come with me, or at least it goes in silent, okay? I'm not going to check through stuff while I'm talking with the Lord. I want to spend time with God. Do you have a place where you make spiritual decisions? A place that you keep going back to? Are you willing to pioneer a life of faith? Pastor Recker, I'm going to leave the invitation with you.